Hello and welcome back to Work Reimagined. This is the podcast that tackles some of the big questions about how work really works. I'm your host, Lee Ward, and each episode I'll bring you a guest from the world of work and workplace culture to explore how we can make the experience of work better for everyone. Now, this week I am chatting to Dr. Jeanne Hardacre about a complex topic that we've started to talk about in past episodes, workplace culture. This time, though, we're going to be discussing the potential culture trap that organisations and leaders fall into and how we might be able to get out of this. Jeanne is an author. She's a founder of a company called Be the Culture Change, and she is someone who has worked with many organisations and thousands of people to help them improve their culture. We do mention this in the episode, but her book, The Culture Trap, tackles the subject we're discussing today. And what I love about it is the clarity and the practicality of it. You can literally pick up that book and start experimenting with some of the activities and ideas she shares straight away to try and improve and develop a really positive culture in your team. So we discuss the culture trap and how well-intentioned people might fall into it. We explore what it is, how you can get out of it, and where to start. A really practical, valuable conversation. So here is my chat with Dr. Jeanne Hardacre. Jeanne, thank you for joining us on Work Reimagined. To get us started, would you be able to give us a little introduction to yourself and what inspires your work?
Hi, Lee, and thank you so much for inviting me on. So I'm Jeanne. I think at a basic level, I'm a 54-year-old woman, and I got my last paycheck over 20 years ago, and I've worked independently since then. That's been a choice. And when I try to encapsulate what I do, or say it simply, I help people get on better together at work so that they can achieve better outcomes. That's essentially what I do. I can dress it up, and some people might call that culture, but essentially that's what people come to me to get help with. So I could list all my credentials, titles, research, experience, 30 years of all of that. I prefer to start the conversation with how I can help. So you asked me also what inspires me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a really interesting question, and I have thought about what really inspires me to do this work, and it's emotions in me. It's the sadness and the dismay over many years that I have witnessed, observed, been a part of, experienced when relationships at work cause real misery and really ruin people's everyday life at work, which happens for far too many people. And combined with that, it's the joy and the hope when I see how that can change, and when I see people and colleagues together learning different ways of interacting, of leading, and of collaborating, and of dealing with the difficult stuff they're doing, but in a way that doesn't leave them feeling drained, stressed, tense, and worse at the end of the working week. So it's this combination of emotion that I feel, the sadness and the real dismay combined with the hope and the joy is really my inspiration.
It's brilliant and a brilliant purpose that aligns with what we talk about on this podcast, really, is how do we make that experience of work better for everyone, whether you are that member of staff at work, whether you're that leader, whether you're that business owner, how do we make that experience better? So thank you for that. The other bit you necessarily didn't mention too much in that introduction was that you're also an author as well.
Yes.
And we can see the book behind you, and I've got the book here that you've written called The Culture Trap, which, like we said, is going to be a big conversation for today. But I guess before we get into that, what I think I would really want to say about that book is, having read it, is the reality that comes through in it. Sometimes you can read some of these business books, some of these leadership books, and there doesn't always seem to be that connection to reality in terms of this idealistic world that we're trying to portray, when actually I think there's a real air to it with this, and it's as practical as you could ever hope for. So I'd highly recommend that, and we will put links in the episode description for it. But for those that may not have seen the book yet, may not have heard about the culture trap, what is it and why is it important that we know about it?
Okay. So what is the culture trap? Yeah, I definitely will describe that really briefly. I just was really happy just now to hear you say how practical you found it, because I have read, as I'm sure you and many of the listeners and audience have read, many books on culture. I've got a head full of them and I've learned a lot. And also, what I've noticed with a lot of them is it feels like, well, I still don't really know what I'm going to do on Monday morning any
Yeah.
differently. I've got these clever ideas in my head, but I just want some help to change things in my reality. And my ambition was to write a book where people can pick it up and have that absolute practical support to go and do something, not just on Monday morning, but this afternoon or this morning, because that is where change happens. So, what is the culture trap? It's what happens without almost realizing it when well intentioned people who view themselves as decent human beings go to work, try their best, and try to get their own needs met in doing their work. And the weird thing that happens when it actually ends up creating really tense, troubled, or toxic relationships. And how does that happen? That is the culture trap. And it's a conditioned set of beliefs and behaviors that people seem to adopt when they go into the workplace that then inadvertently trap us into mindsets and norms of behaving together that actually don't serve us very well at all. So I've been fascinated for the last 20 odd years as to how does this happen and why does it happen so often in so many places? And what can we do to avoid it? Or if we find ourselves in that trap, how can we liberate and escape?
And we're going to talk about that, escaping the culture trap,
Yeah.
and where people might want to start with that. But you did talk there, and again, that came through in the book, of that there is often good intention with
Yeah.
this, and we've talked about this on other episodes on this podcast as well, of people are not intentionally creating these negative cultures or intentionally creating these negative experiences, and often good intentions that they have,
Uh-huh.
but something is happening or something is taking place that does create that kind of environment.
Mm.
So from your experience,
Yeah.
how do we end up falling into that trap, and what have you seen from your own experiences working with businesses and leaders?
Sure. So what I've learned and what I love to share with others to help them see it is that at work, there are so many reasons for people to feel under threat or feel uncomfortable or feel uncertain because the world is a really complex place at work. And when people as human beings feel those things, they have a very predictable way of responding individually, but then also in teams and groups. And it takes us into what I call self-protect mode. And that knocks us out of collaboration and authentic connection and things that build trust and into, actually, I just need to get through the day. I just need to make sure that I maintain this sort of persona that people will approve of me. And it's very, very fear based. And we have organizations where people are, without necessarily always realizing it, fearing all sorts of things all of the time and behaving accordingly. And so when we can actually understand what's happening, we can start to realize that the being driven to self protect, and there are four key aspects of that: blaming each other, distracting away from things that we don't really want to pay attention to, that are too uncomfortable, whether that be conversations or issues or realities. Trying to solve everything, trying to be in control of everything is another response that many of us take, or placating, saying, it's fine really, let's look on the bright side, let's make everything okay for everybody. Those are the four core responses at a human level. And most of us fall into some of those to keep ourselves feeling less threatened. And they're human natural responses. But the problem with those is that they create an environment where we really can't get our best work done. And it's almost sets people up as if it's a competition to survive, rather than in a way where we can really tap into bringing each other's amazingness and also our imperfections together to do the very best work we can.
Do you see, Jeanne, so just thinking about those things you said there and that safety, particularly then with everything that's going on in the world. Do you
Mm.
see more people falling into the culture trap more often in your work at the moment? Because it's that there isn't necessarily that safety for some people and some groups out there in the world, and they might feel that within the workplace as well, like you said, and those natural reactions that you talked about there about blaming people, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding the real kind of elephant in the room that we need to be talking about, but everyone's too scared to do that because of that safety. Do you see that happening more often, or has this been a general kind of theme that this happens in businesses for lots of different reasons?
My sense is that the more pressurized and the more uncertain the environment becomes, the more likely this is to happen and the more intensely it is experienced. And so obviously with the world of work and more generally in society and globally as it is at the moment, I am noticing this even more and more in lots and lots of ways. However, I would also say that increasingly I'm coming across teams and people at work and leaders who are starting to realize that this is not sustainable. We're going to self-destruct
Yeah,
if we carry on this way. In organizational terms, it's going to mean that people will not want to work in this organization. We won't be able to attract them. We won't be able to recruit them. We won't be able to retain them because people increasingly don't want work to feel like this. And they're finding other options in terms of earning a living rather than opting for joining an organisation where the culture trap is the reality. This is what I work with leaders and teams to understand and then to put into practice. And there are key things we can do to shift away from the blaming, the distracting, the trying to solve everything and be in control and the placating. And those are some of the very early ideas and practical things that I guide people through with the book and with the programs that people join me on. So there is hope and there are practical ways to do this, but the starting point is noticing that actually I might be contributing to the problem here, not because I'm trying to, but because I'm actually just trying to survive. And once I can acknowledge that, I can let go of worrying that other people might see me as part of the problem and just fess up and say, actually, yeah, I possibly am contributing to this dynamic and to these power dynamics. And I can choose to do that differently.
yeah. So let's get onto that antidote then, in terms of people have found themselves in the culture trap. They're recognizing some of those signs that you're talking about. And I know I'm going to be asking you to boil down
Yeah,
this book in a few minutes. So that is
of
where the
course.
detail is. That is where the real practical advice and guidance is there. So I would continue to recommend people to go and buy the book, take a look at the book and digest all of that. But as an introduction, how do we get out of that culture trap if we found ourselves in it?
So it can feel overwhelming. And that's what I hear from a lot of teams and leaders is, oh my gosh, where do we start? And so the way that I offer to people is deceptively simple, but it's simple because it's then easier to remember. So it's HUMAN, human, the human approach. So, very briefly, what those 5 things stand for, although there's layers and layers and lots and loads of practical, rich things to use and put into practice within each one, each is for honesty. And it sounds so simple and yet so difficult to be honest at work so much of the time. And we're not talking here about just saying whatever you think or feel. That kind of honesty. We're talking about what I call humble honesty. Honesty about human nature, the good bits and the bits we're maybe not so proud of, and moving away from the pattern of pretense that everybody is trying to pretend that things are fine or that we know what we're doing, or there's loads of pretense in the workplace. So honesty is the H. U is uncomfortable. And it's about finding ways to positively disrupt the status quo, because change only comes from making new choices and doing things differently. But what often happens is by disrupting the status quo, it can often feel quite confronting, and it's something people would rather avoid. Those really conversations I really don't want to have. but are essential to build better understanding or to set more realistic expectations. So that uncomfortable challenge is a skill set that is absolutely critical to shifting the culture. So the U is for uncomfortable. Uncomfortable doesn't need to be a horrible experience. Uncomfortable can be something that reveals real new possibilities. M is messy, because I don't know about you, but when people go to work and start working together, things can quickly get messy. And actually just acknowledging that this is not straightforward. It's not something we can kind of put a nice neat Gantt chart against. It's not something we can get elegant, perfect solutions to. It is intrinsically messy. And helping people to find ways to nurture healthy, effective group dynamics and power dynamics, and using power dynamics effectively so that we can avoid those traps that teams so often fall into, and find ways to really get human behavior working in a way that avoids those traps is what the M is all about. A is around amazing impact, because what I see so much of is that people, for whatever reason, don't necessarily realize how much power they have at work. And so I work with people to find new ways of influencing through the power they have. And once people start to let go of this belief that other people are the ones with the power, and start to really use their own power to influence more effectively, even within, maybe a small group of people, or for leaders influencing differently from how they've learned to influence over the years, that can create hugely amazing impact. And N is for new, because changing habits, which is what a lot of this book is about, habits individually and in our collective work, is all very well, but embedding those and sustaining those can be really hard. And so it's providing support to have new ways of working together, using our power, new ways of setting and agreeing expectations, and really embedding new norms of behaving. So that's the HUMAN approach, as a very headline summary.
One of my questions was going to be how you got to that, because I think if you didn't even have that human framework, something I would say that comes through is the human element to all of what you are advising people, that this is going to be uncomfortable, this is going to be messy, there is going to be emotions involved in this, and you talked about that being your inspiration as well in terms of those
Yes.
emotions and how important that is. It's obviously a great framework as well, and easy to remember in terms of that acronym of human. Was that a really important part for you when you were developing that antidote and developing the framework and the book?
Yes, it has been a long process and many, many years of research, both academic research that was when I had more of an academic role and was involved in formal research leading to my PhD and so on, but also just years and years and years of working with this reality and the teams and the leaders that I've had the privilege of supporting over 2 or 3 decades now. And it got to the point where I just myself was almost at desperation point of being in so much despair about what I was seeing and experiencing. There's a long story attached to why I actually sat down and started writing this book, which we probably haven't got time for now. But it was dark times. I would just say that, Lee.
Yeah.
And if people are interested, there's stuff on YouTube and in the book about what that was for me. And I just wanted to try to pull together decades of literature and really incisive work from a whole range of resources and sources and inspirational people into something that was like a practical handbook, but that also tried to simplify what is incredibly complex and multifaceted, but without patronizing people, without distilling it so much that it loses the essence. And at the heart of what I saw the gap being, or what I just was not finding in other kind of resources, was this really honest engagement with, do you know what? Every single one of us, I believe, has huge potential to be a force for good in the world. And I believe every single one of us actually has the potential, if we find ourselves in the conditions that lead to it, to cause real harm to each other. That is the truth as being a human being. And once we can really engage with that as a leader and as a manager and own it for ourselves and work with it in that humbly honest way, it reveals so many new ways of having conversations with people, of relating to people. And that is the human approach. And so this is human with a small h, as in just
Yeah.
work, but it's also encapsulated in the acronym, and intentionally so, because I try to walk this stuff and I don't always
Yeah.
do it right, and I still make mistakes, but I have seen the transformation that this brings across sectors, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, because do you know what, it really works.
So if I was to walk into an
Yeah.
organisation that has escaped this culture trap, Jeanne, what sort of things might I see? You talked about the practical application of that framework,
Yes.
people taking it and delivering it within their workplace. What sort of really tangible things might you see within those organisations?
Well, I can give you an example of a team I've just finished working with over 6, 7 months, who started out with grievances against each other, massively high levels of stress, people off sick, people at each other's throat verbally in the workplace, a complete lack of trust, and people really struggling to stay well as a result of what it was like in this particular team and organisation. And there's no magic wands here, Lee, but
Yeah.
I've just worked with them for the final time, and they are about to take this all work forward and spread it even further. And they articulate in the most heart-rending way the way they have learned to be vulnerable with each other, learned to really take a risk, to trust that there isn't an ulterior motive in each other's behaviour, to really focus in on what are we here for, and what are we worried about, and having those conversations about how we feel as well as what we think, letting go of pretending that we actually always know what we're doing, or that being willing to accept and acknowledge and take responsibility for our practice, our mistakes, as well as our successes. And when they articulate the change, they basically say, we didn't trust each other, and now we are learning to really trust each other. And you cannot program manage your way or action plan your way into building trust. It has to happen through facilitating different kinds of conversations. And that's the essence of the work I do, is I facilitate teams to have conversations in different ways so that they can do their work in more effective ways. So that's how I would articulate what you would see and notice.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's about mini experimenting. So you say, where do people start? Well, the book is packed with mini experiments, which are the smallest things you just go and try and respond differently from how you normally would. And it sounds so simple and tiny, and yet the effect of that, if a team starts to do that jointly, if a whole organization starts to embrace that, is phenomenal. And this mindset of just trying something different in our responses and letting go of worrying that actually if I don't just behave the way we always behave, it might be embarrassing or might go wrong. Letting go of that and being gentle, supportive with each other just makes a phenomenal difference, and really can have disproportionate impact beyond what apparently is quite small change.
Again, what comes through that is human to human interaction, adult to adult interaction, I think, and those conversations that you talked about facilitated. Jeanne, we've come to the end of the time we've got to talk about the culture trap. We will put the link to the book and the link to yourself within the episode description so everybody can connect with you to continue this conversation. Before we get on to the quick fire questions to finish, just to say thank you for writing the book, and as you've done in the book, in this conversation, articulating something that can be really complex and can be difficult to get your head around in such a simple sort of way that people can understand what it means for them as well. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, Lee, for all your passion in this area as well.
Thanks, Jeanne. And the quick fire questions we're going to finish, and I think you probably touched on some of these, but it'd be good to get your thoughts on it. If there is one thing about workplace culture that you think needs reimagining, what would that be and why?
It would be stop waiting for them, whoever they are, to change the culture. And actually, our reimagining is the culture is us, and only we can change it in our team, in our organisation. Let's start right now, because we can do this.
Great reiteration of messages we've seen in other episodes as well. And if there's one myth about leadership that you think needs changing, what would that be?
I don't know whether it's a myth, but it's an unfortunate reality. And you know what? It's the carrot and stick. The carrot and stick. Oh my goodness. Reward and punishment as a leadership and management strategy is not a myth. It's a reality for too many people, and it just is not serving us any longer. It might have done in the 19th or 20th centuries, but it is not fit for purpose. And so let's change this belief that we can get the best out of people from carrots and sticks. We're not donkeys.
There's the clip. There's the clip for the episode. If there's one word that you think captures a thriving workplace, what would that be?
It's going to have to be human, isn't it, Lee? Whether it's human or HUMAN. Yeah, there we have it.
Brilliant. Great place to finish. Jeanne, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate you giving it.
Thank you,
Come and talk to
Lee.
us. Thanks to Jeanne for that discussion and for sharing the work from her book. There are links to Jeanne, her work and the book in the episode description. Thanks to everyone that has got in touch about past episodes. If you have topics you would like us to cover or guests you think it would be great to get on, then please do let us know in the comments. But until then, thanks for listening to Work Reimagined.